Home is a place where I can come home at the end of the day and I don't feel like I have to put up any walls anymore, and I can just be myself and I can relax.
Home is where I live, but it's also a place of safety and a place where I feel secure and cared for and where I care for others.
Like the place that you want to come home to at the end of the day, or like when you've been away for a while where you come home and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I've been wanting to come back to.
I think home means having people to cuddle when I need them, never not having enough food, having more support than I would have on my own.
It does mean like love, however like hippy dippy that sounds. Like home isn't something that you can have on your own, it's something you need to work on with other people.
The housing crisis is something that has been created by the fact that all that's on offer is home ownership. All that's on offer are homes that are extremely expensive, that are going to kind of commit you to massive repayments on mortgages if you were lucky enough to get the deposit in the first place. So we've got a housing crisis of affordability. So that's about the prices of home ownership and the prices of rent. So the crisis is that most of the homes being provided are extremely expensive. So in this country at the moment, we've got more bedrooms to give everybody in the entire country their own bedroom. But of course, all those bedrooms are owned by a much smaller number of people, so we've got a distribution problem. It's not about building more houses, it's about sharing the ones we've got more equitably. We stopped building council housing, we stopped building affordable housing, as in housing to rent at prices that people could actually afford. So 80% of all the homes being built in this country are for sale, and they're being built by firms who are about making profit. Perhaps the biggest problem, the biggest part of the housing crisis for us is that housing is no longer a home. It's now seen as a property asset whose only purpose is to pay a rental yield. So the idea of housing that's affordable to people, or housing that's secure to people, has kind of been jettisoned, not just by financial services organisations, pension funds, private equity funds, but by governments themselves. So I think there's two avenues. One, we need to go back to thinking about housing as a home, housing as something as a basic need, and that needs to be provided, and that's what government policy should be promoting, rather than promoting property investment. And the other is about people taking action themselves, and social movements that provide their own housing.
Hi, welcome to Greenwood.
This is Greenwood, a Leeds-based housing cooperative created just 3 years ago. Did they have a solution to the housing crisis?
My name's Izzy.
Natalia?
Jess?
Hi, my name's Anna and I live at Greenwood Housing Co-op.
Here we have our post organisation system and the 7 cooperative principles on the wall to always remind us what we're working towards.
What is a housing co-op?
So there are many different types of housing co-ops actually. Ours is just one type of housing co-op.
The housing co-op itself is a legal entity, not unlike a not-for-profit business.
So the 6 of us form the business of the housing co-op, and the purpose of the business is to provide housing to its members. So because it's fully mutual, no one can be a member of the business without also being a member of the household.
It's a business which only aim is to own this property and maintain it for people to live in it.
Our housing co-op is a model of housing where instead of renting from a private landlord and basically filling their pockets, we are empowered to have control over our housing, and all the tenants who live in the housing co-op are responsible for providing housing.
And if you come through here, there's the kitchen. So lots of the stuff in this kitchen has been built by members. We've got our nice kitchen island, the shelves over there, The stained glass was even done by a member. Then over here we've got our notice board and "Are you in for tea" chart, where we are able to see, like, if we're cooking dinner, how many people we need to cook for. So this is where we cook. Everyone cooks at least one night a week normally, because there's like 6 or 7 of us around, so it means you pretty much only cook once a week, which is great.
I live here at Greenwood Housing Co-op. I'm also actually one of the original members of Greenwood Housing Co-op. I joined kind of because I was so interested and excited about it, and then got really invested, and now I've been here for ages. So this is a photo album that we've been putting photos in right since when we began. So we've got some photos in here of like the first meals that we had in the house, on the floor in the kitchen with no heating and no furniture. Yeah, so the house had been uninhabited for 6 months when we moved in, and the electric and the gas and the heating had all been turned off, I think. So we had to get them all reconnected, and we lived here for a little while with no heating in February, and it was very cold. And then we did a lot of the work ourselves, so we kind of completely ripped the loft to bits and then rebuilt it with different walls and kind of insulation in the ceiling and things like that. And that was supposed to be a 2-week project, and it turned into 6 months of work. Here we are on the first day we began with no idea what it would become. There's some nice photos of us as a group. So there's photos of new members, like making changes to their bedrooms and putting up new things.
I decided to live in a housing co-op mainly because I'd been really good friends with Izzy for a while, so I was friends with them when they set up the housing co-op. I'd been round to Greenwood quite a lot, and I loved the atmosphere and thought I'd be really happy living here. But I also, through Izzy, started learning about the politics behind the housing co-ops. So the idea of living without landlords and having kind of empowered housing, and that really attracted me as well.
I was in a position in my life where I couldn't afford to buy a house, but I very much didn't want to be renting from landlords anymore. Being a trans woman, it can be quite scary looking for places to live. Not everywhere is accepting. I mean, you need only look at like the statistics of hate crime, for example, to see that we have a problem. So finding somewhere that is kind of a communal environment with lots of people, but is also LGBT friendly, was like amazing. It was amazing to find that.
I lived in London for quite a few years, where rent is obviously super, super high, and you just feel like you're pouring down a huge percentage of your income down the drain. And there was like one landlord who tried to stop me and my partner from moving in when they found out that we were queer. Yeah, I guess in London the feeling really is like the best kind of landlord almost is like a neglectful one, because then they just leave you alone and they forget about you. But that means that, you know, I've lived in houses where like we've paid hundreds of pounds for like repairs or like replacing the oven or whatever, rather than get in touch with the landlord, because we were scared that if the landlord remembered that we existed, that he would put the rent up.
Our garden in full bloom, meaning lots of nasturtium flowers. We have a garden team, which means 2 members take specific responsibility of the garden and grow all of our food. Well, not all of it, but some of it. So we have some tomatoes, there's definitely pumpkins around somewhere, beans grow over there, we've got our strawberry patch. Oh, and our compost bin. Spinny compost bin. It's quite hard to spin.
We're quite a social co-op. We're a very close, like friendship, sort of socially, emotionally co-op.
I think this is not necessarily co-ops in general, but at Greenwood we do have quite a lot of things in place to prevent and resolve conflict, because it's one of the main ways in which co-ops, like in the past, or in the history of cooperatives, have failed, is like socially. It's not really, it doesn't tend to be financially. It tends to be that like the group falls apart.
In general, like we do quite a lot of like hanging out together, both like in just like a chill after dinner way, but also like in an organized fun kind of way. Like we quite like planning like dinner parties or like events or doing stuff together.
We quite often have guests around as well, and the kitchen quite often fills up with people. Other than that, we also like gardening together, working on the house together, and also doing fun activities like fancy dress, we did a sports day for someone's birthday, we did a bar crawl around all the different rooms of the house, things like that.
Generally, it's like living in a big family almost. It's really lovely. It's a really lovely way to live.
Greenwood is still a relatively young co-op. Round the corner is Cornerstone, a more established cooperative house. Resident Kath has been there since the beginning and has been following the course of the movement for 30 years.
Cornerstone has been here since 1993, at least in this house. We bought another one in 1995 up the road. I have lived here since 1995 when I became a member. So it was the era of the road protests and massive social squats, anti-GM action. So lots and lots of action was happening, and there was a wave of housing co-ops set up by eco-activists. There haven't been as many co-ops set up as I had imagined there would be. It is quite difficult. It requires a certain social confidence, I guess. I think it's quite idealistic to hope that co-op housing can combat the housing crisis, purely because it takes so much energy, at least in the current environment, to set up a housing co-op. If it were to tackle the housing crisis, I think that would need huge amounts of resource and also training and profile raising. I think it's quite challenging to apply to Cornerstone. We'd like it to be easy, but also we want to find the people who are best going to fit in with us and best going to take responsibility for being a co-op member. It is interesting when we're thinking about who do we want to live with. We are trying to balance out being accessible to a wide range of people with being comfortable with who we live with. We would like to be more integrated into the local community. So we have advertised locally, but it is quite interesting, like we're not that socially integrated in our local community, and you'd have to ask yourself why somebody who lived in Chapeltown would necessarily want to come and live here. But we also don't want to have tokenistic attempts to have one disabled person and one brown person and one black person. I mean, that would just be terrible. So yeah, trying to strike that balance is difficult, and it's also true, I think, that you can't build a community that's based on difference. This is people's homes. People have to be able to relax a bit here, rather than always like, oh, I can't remember how I'm supposed to communicate with this person or that person. And I guess that sounds quite a lot like making excuses, but I don't think we're that bad, actually. I think, we're doing pretty well at advertising in various places and attracting people from quite different backgrounds.
Back at Greenwood, work on the house is underway.
So today is one of our DIY days. We have these every so often where we'll all sort of get together in the morning, decide what tasks need to be done, have communal breakfast, and then kind of split off into various parts of the house, do some painting, some garden work, some insulating, fixing things that we've broken or that just kind of need to be working a bit better. And then we have like lunch, and we always buy nice snacks, and then we have a bit of a checkout at the end of the day to like celebrate what we've done and plan for the next one.
Well, the thing about living in a housing co-op is that it is a lot of extra work in a way that living in a shared house wouldn't be, and it's quite time consuming as well. So one of the tensions for me is how much energy we are directing inwards and investing in the housing co-op versus how much energy we're directing outwards into the wider community, because we don't want to just end up spending all our time and energy and resources benefiting just the individuals who live within the housing co-op. We want it to be part of a wider political project.
Well, we're currently going through a bit of a visioning process at the moment, but part of that is this question of like, what is our responsibility as a cooperative to the rest of society, and like I think a lot of us do feel that there's a responsibility of us as a group, as a cooperative, to be challenging the way that like society as a whole like excludes people from housing opportunities and from secure housing.
Housing co-ops do seem to very much be the domain of white middle class individuals, and where there's smoke there's fire, and that makes me think that there might not be things I can see that would stand in the way of people applying and joining an organisation like Greenwood, for example, but I think they must be there. And I think the housing co-op movement probably has a lot of work to do to make it more accessible.
So as part of the visioning process, one of the things that we've been talking about is kind of what kind of impact we want our co-op to have in the world.
I think one thing for me that the co-op's kind of already provided is like a really like safe and welcoming space for like a trans person. So I think if that's something we could continue doing, not just for like the people who live here, but also for people in the community, that would be really nice.
Well, I guess like for this individual co-op, particularly like one of our aims and principles, like kind of part of our mission statement was to like encourage and promote and facilitate the growth of the co-op movement and like help other new co-ops to set up and like skill share as well as like resource share to assist with like the growth of the co-op movement and like more and more co-ops to develop and set up.
I think co-ops can play a really important role in solving the housing crisis because they can provide affordable, stable, secure housing for people. But I also think the movement needs to be a lot bigger and a lot more inclusive and not just serve one particular type of people.
Co-ops for me are part of the answer to the broken housing system in the UK, and it might even be useful to say that like the housing system itself, like it's not so much that it's broken, but it's geared towards serving the rich, serving those who already own property, you know, like it's actually very much serving its purpose. It's not just that it's not working, it's working a very specific way, in a way that hurts most people except for a small percentage of people who own a lot of wealth. So I do see it as a part of the answer or a facet of the answer, but it's certainly not on its own.
I think they're part of a solution, and it is great to see people standing up and kind of taking responsibility and like setting up housing co-ops. But the truth is, a lot of people who struggle to find housing don't have the time, energy or resources to go about setting up housing co-ops, and I think help kind of has to come from the state, really, if I'm honest.
I like bringing my friends here. They can see that there can be like a sort of different idea of a family than just sort of your born-in family. It's quite nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially as someone who's like quite far away from my family, both like emotionally and also just physically, geographically, like having family in a household is like super important to me. And that kind of makes a big difference kind of where you live.
Yeah, it's not just like a transient group of people who happen to be sharing a house, who have like limited actual involvement or investment in each other's lives and also in like the bonds between us, but that we actually like are more intentional about that.
Yeah, we are really invested in each other like a lot of the time. Intensely.
And I think I kind of just take that for granted. Like, it doesn't occur to me that that's not the norm.
Life in the co-op involves a lot of commitment and quite a lot of like work, but also like a lot of reward in the kind of social and like emotional connections that you form with each other.
It's a song that we used to do in primary school before we ate our lunch, and we would say, "Thank you, Lord, for this fight. Thank you, Lord."
There is something about like not just seeing a co-op as like a legal structure or like a way of living. For me, home means something around commitment, not necessarily like forever in the future, but like to each other in the moment that you're in, and being committed to sort of being invested in each other
we're all invested in making sure this house runs well because we have to live in it and no one is going to come and fix things for us, which I think connects you all more than living just in a shared house can do.